As a race driver, it's your job to have your vehicle, your car, on the absolute limit, on a push lap, on the absolute limit for the entire lap. That means when you're accelerating, it's obviously got to be full throttle, 100%. The gear shifts have to be bang on in time. Braking. When you're braking, it has to be, again, on the absolute limit, as late as possible without affecting the exit. If there's a gust of wind, you'll be forced off the track because you're that much on the knife edge. You have to keep the car there throughout the entire phase of every single corner, whether it's under acceleration, in the corner going in, whatever it is. And it's your job as a driver to keep it there. But there's one thing that I see a problem with this, is that most drivers, when they start testing at the very beginning of their career, especially, or when they go to a new car, they build up to the limit. They incrementally, at first they're told how to drive, the technique, use this brake shape and do this, but then they incrementally build up to the limit, which is okay. It's safe. You're feeding the brain with the information it needs to know, but time after time I see that something's being missed here. Because building up to a limit, it allows the self-preservation of a driver to come in. For example, if you're going through a very high-speed corner in a high downforce car, and you know that the more that you brake, if you brake hard, the car's going to be upset and you're going to go through that corner slower and it's going to feel terrible. That's just the fact, right? So you're going up towards Snetterton, turn 1, and if you're in a high downforce car, if you stab the brake a bit too much, it makes the car all unbalanced and it feels terrible and you'll never be quick through there. However, the fast driver through there, he's just maybe breathing on the brake and being very gentle with the controls and keeping the platform of the car flat. So the car's like, yes, I'm using my aero. I'm not being upset at all. And a lot of drivers can't do that because they're built up to the limit gently, and it takes a bit of bravery to do it. Whereas when you get drivers that are very confident in their car control, that are very used to going over the limit, they don't really use their self-preservation to tell them where the limit of the car is. Instead, they listen to the car. They feel what it's telling them. They understand what the car needs, and they give it to the car. Their emotions about that corner is irrelevant. Their fears about that corner, irrelevant, not important. What I want, who cares? It's what the car wants. So I'm going to drive that corner in a way where the car can be maximized all the way through the phases, entry, mid, exit, and that's where their brain is. Now, something I want you to, that's lesson number 1. You must do that if you want to be a top driver. Think about the car more than how you feel about going through this corner a bit quick, if the wall's a bit close. That's not how a race driver's coded or thinks. So work on that first of all. But what I really notice is testing the limits. That's what I want to get at here today. Testing the limits of the car that you're in and making it feel like it fits like a glove. You love the car, you know everything about it, you know when it's really over the limit or when it's on the limit. You have got all that sensory knowledge and intelligence of when you're there and you're communicating with the car. If you build up to a limit, you never really find it. If you go over the limit, test the car, put it in impossible situations, spin it a few times, then you start to understand what it feels like. And you're educating your body of how it feels and the mind of how to react to it in a calm way. And that's what I want to get at. Now look at people like back in the day, Nigel Mansell, we're going back to the 90s now. His first IndyCar test, this is after he won the World Championship. He went and did an IndyCar test at Phoenix, his very first one. He even took a road car out on track just to see where the track goes, and he was pushing that to the absolute limit. Lesson number 1, the amount of times you see drivers doing a track drive of a circuit they're trying to learn and they're doing it very slow, very gently. That's nothing to do with what the car or the track's going to feel like. You start to add speed to it with the car really forced on the limit, then you start to learn what the track's like. That is an example of what I'm talking about here. And it's the same with his car. Without the team's permission, he started to do bloody donuts. He started to do donuts and spin the car. And his philosophy, what he said, was basically, that's what I want to do to learn the limits of the car. Again, no permission from the team. Can you imagine drivers doing this now? Because they're so dominated by what the team says, I've got to impress them, they wouldn't do it. But this is Mansell knowing I need to push the car to the over the limit to start to feel what it's like, the grip, and build my intelligence. And then when he went out on track, he was I was told by one of the mechanics that I used to work with in IndyCar, he said he was spinning, locking up tyres, it was all over the place because it was a dusty track. What the hell have we got here? He's supposed to be an F1 world champion, he was from last year, and look at him, he's all over the place. But this again was him testing the limits, finding out what the car's like, understanding things, starting way above where it needs to be and then coming back. And then within 35 laps, guess what he did? He broke the track record. And all of a sudden the team are like, I get it now. I get what this driver's doing. And that is just an example of what I'm trying to get at. And when I talk to drivers that are really good in the wet, they do something similar. It's this kind of training the body to understand the limit. When I talk to drivers that are good in the wet, Verstappen, I've asked him, Liam Lawson, and they have pretty much the same story. When they were kids, they were put on the track in the wet, even on slicks. And their dads were out there, right, brake here now. And they would stand at a braking point. They would then go later, pushing them. And they knew that the dad knew that if I stand this late into the corner, the kid's going to go straight on, but at least he learns the limit. And when I see drivers, I can kind of get that they've had the same kind of education in the formative years. They're used to pushing the cart or the car over the limit. So they understand and they get rid of the fears as well because they know, what's the worst that can happen. They've survived so many spins that it builds up the courage. So it's important and interesting that drivers that are at the very top, they seem to really go outside comfort zones, but outside the limits and then come back. Where I'll see drivers that are not quite the fastest in the world, they start low or medium sort of level and they build up to the speed. This is important, an important lesson here. I want you in your training, no matter what level of racing you're at, to incorporate over the limit training. So that means maybe going to an airfield in your race car, or it doesn't matter what car, to be fair. It'd be great if it is the race car, but I know you can damage it, damage the gearbox and brakes and tyres and drive shafts, should I say, and things. But I want you to learn the limit of the car in a controlled environment where you can, you put out cones, or there's a corner where if you go off it doesn't really matter, but to really test the limit and start to get used to the car being out of control and then you controlling it to bring it back in order, to overstep the mark, to have the skill to have car control, for your butt to tell the brain when you're on the limit and to really push that side of it. Because I tell you what, if you start to approach your race in this way, whether it's a rally course or doing something that's on the edge or over the limit and being comfortable in that area, you'll improve massively. All you then got to do is smoothen things out to actually put a lap time in. But I remember even myself, I was an okay driver at the start, but then I started to work at race schools and I started to do demonstration driving, which meant drifting at high speed, taking passengers out like in this photo, drifting away and spending my days doing this, day after day, week after week, drifting cars. And I tell you what, my driving improved massively because I never did that in a race car. But that really showed me that going over the limit helps you become a better driver. How can you incorporate this? Whether it's a car control course, there's plenty out there in the world, whether it is a rally course, whether it's taking your car to a controlled environment where you can spin and have a bit of fun and learn the absolute limits, or even if it's a test day with safe corners, things that you can actually try. I want you to start pushing the limit more. Understand your race car when it's over the limit. Get comfortable with it moving around. And I tell you what, this is for karters and cars, this is a game changer.